My name is Daniel Cole, but everyone calls me Danny. I'm 24 now, but this happened when I was 14, during the summer of 2015. That summer, my parents decided I should socialize more instead of spending all my time in front of a computer. So they signed me up for a month-long summer camp in northern Maine called Whisper Pines. The camp had been around since the 1960s, nestled deep in the forest, miles away from the nearest town. No cell service, no internet, just a bunch of creaky wooden cabins, a small lake, and miles of trails disappearing into the pine trees. When my mom dropped me off, I remember feeling an odd chill. The air was warm, but the moment I stepped onto the campgrounds, it felt heavier, like the forest was watching me. I told myself it was just nerves. I got assigned to Cabin 6, along with 5 other boys. Tyler, the loud one who thought he was hilarious. Mark, the cool guy with perfect hair. Luke, quiet, always reading. Kevin, the one who wouldn't stop talking about horror movies. And Chris, my bunkmate, the kid who snored so loudly I thought the roof would cave in. Our counselor was a tall, pale man named Evan. Something about him instantly made me uneasy. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and when he talked, his voice was soft. Too soft, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. The first few days were pretty normal. Campfires, swimming in the lake, and hiking trails that seemed to go on forever. But on the third night, I woke up to a sound outside our cabin. It was a whisper, not like a hushed conversation, more like a single voice repeating my name. Danny! I sat up, heart pounding. Everyone else was asleep. I looked toward the window, but it was too dark to see anything. I told myself it was just Kevin trying to mess with me, but the voice didn't sound like him. It sounded older. The next morning, I mentioned it at breakfast. Evan, our counselor, froze for a second before forcing a smile and telling me I'd probably been dreaming. But Luke, the quiet kid, looked at me with wide eyes and said, "You heard it too, didn't you?" He explained that the camp had a story. They called it the Whisperer. Supposedly, back in the 1970s, a camper disappeared in the middle of the night. Witnesses claimed they'd heard someone whispering his name from the woods just before he vanished. Of course, everyone else laughed it off, but that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The fourth night, it happened again. The whisper was closer this time, right outside the wall next to my bunk. My skin went cold. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. Then I heard footsteps, slow, crunching pine needles. They stopped right by the door. I waited for someone to knock, but instead, the door creaked just slightly, like someone was testing it. I almost screamed, but the sound stopped, and after what felt like an eternity, I finally heard the steps fade into the woods. A week later, during a late-night campfire, Evan told us we were going on a midnight hike, a tradition for new campers. We all groaned, but he insisted. He led us down a narrow trail lit only by our flashlights. After about 20 minutes, I realized we were going much deeper into the forest than usual. The trees were thicker, the air colder. Eventually, Evan stopped at a small clearing with an old, rotting wooden shack in the middle. "This," he said with a smile, "is where the missing camper was last seen." Everyone laughed nervously, thinking it was just a scary story session. But then Evan's smile faded and his voice dropped to that too soft tone again. "Sometimes they come back." The forest went silent. No crickets, no wind, just stillness. Then I heard it, the whisper, right behind me. "Danny." I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand, but no one was there. My heart was slamming against my ribs. Mark suddenly shouted that he'd seen someone moving between the trees. Tyler's flashlight went out. Kevin started panicking. And then, Luke was gone. We called his name, but the whisper drowned us out. It was everywhere now, circling us, coming from every direction. Evan didn't move. He just stood there, smiling again. They always take one. We ran. I don't remember how I made it back to camp, but when we burst into the main lodge, the other counselors looked confused. They said Evan had left earlier that night and hadn't taken us anywhere. The police were called. Search teams combed the forest for 3 days. They never found Luke. I never went back to Whisper Pines. Sometimes, though, I still hear that whisper. Late at night, right outside my window. Danny. My name is Maya, and this story happened to me one summer when I was 18. It was my 3rd summer at Camp Blackwood, a place that should have been full of childhood joy, new friends, and carefree adventures. But nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced. The entire camp was surrounded by dense pine forests that stretched for miles. During the day, sunlight filtered through the branches, filling everything with warmth. But at night, that same forest transformed into something else. Dark, cold, alive. I always felt like someone or something was watching us from within those trees. The first night was relatively calm. Laughter, singing around the campfire, and playful ghost stories told by the counselors. But on the second night, everything changed. I was lying in my wooden cabin thinking about all those scary stories we had heard. Suddenly, it felt as though the forest had come alive. I heard a soft whisper, like the wind playing with the pine needles, but it sounded too clear, like someone was quietly calling me. The voice was barely audible, but I understood the words perfectly. Go. Leave. My heart clenched. I pulled the blanket over me, trying to drown out the fear, but the whisper didn't stop. It seemed to swirl around me, mixing with the night sounds. I couldn't sleep. The feeling of danger pressed on my chest. The next morning, I told Liam, my best friend at camp, about the voices. He just laughed. Maya, it's camp. Everyone tells ghost stories. Don't be scared. But I couldn't just brush it off. Those voices were real. Later that day, I approached the old ranger station, an abandoned building we were strictly forbidden to enter. The door was slightly ajar, and despite my fear, I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and decay. On the wall, I noticed strange, barely legible symbols carved into the wood, and on the floor was a large circle made of ash and some dark substance. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, but no one was there. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. I was alone in the dark. Panic overtook me. I pounded on the door, calling for help. My flashlight flickered in my trembling hands, seeming to betray me. It felt like an eternity before the door opened. Standing there was Mr. Grayson, the camp director, with a serious, worried look. "What are you doing here?" he whispered. "This place is dangerous." I told him about the whispers and the symbols, but he just smiled slyly and said, "Ignore it. It's all just stories." But that night, the whispers came back, louder, angrier. I heard them even in my dreams. The next day, a new boy named Eli arrived. He was quiet, somber, and seemed to know something too. When I asked him about the ranger station, he shook his head. "Don't go there. It's cursed." From that moment, the atmosphere at camp shifted. The forest seemed to sigh and whisper, and shadows grew longer and darker. On the 4th night, the worst happened. During a violent thunderstorm, the power went out, and darkness swallowed everything. In the flashes of lightning, I saw a figure at the edge of the forest, a tall silhouette with glowing red eyes. I ran back to the cabin, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would burst. Liam looked scared too, though he tried to hide it. Then a scream shattered the night, Eli's scream. Everyone ran outside, but Eli was gone. We searched the woods but found no trace. The next night, I found a note under my pillow. "You're next." I showed it to Mr. Grayson, but he shrugged it off as a prank. I knew it wasn't. In the following days, things began disappearing, shadows moved where they shouldn't, and the voices grew into screams tearing through the night. Liam and I decided to investigate the ranger station again. This time, we brought flashlights, a knife, and an old book we found in the camp library. Inside, the symbols glowed with an unnatural light. We felt a cold chill run down our spines, and suddenly, a dark presence filled the air. Shadows materialized, ancient forest spirits, twisted and terrifying. Their voices rustled like leaves in the wind. You disturbed our rest. Now the curse is upon you." A chase through the forest began. Paths shifted, trees moved, and it felt like we would never escape. Finally, we returned to the camp, where the director confessed the terrible truth. Long ago, a dark ritual was performed here, binding the spirits to this land. Our actions had broken the seal. I found an old journal describing how to perform a counter-ritual to free the forest from the curse. We gathered everything: herbs, stones, and an ancient amulet hidden beneath the oldest tree. That evening, in total darkness, we formed a circle and recited the incantations. The spirits wailed, casting shadows like death itself. But in the end, light overcame darkness. The next morning, I stepped outside and saw the sun shining brighter than ever. The missing campers returned, dazed but alive. This camp changed me forever. I still remember the first day I arrived at Camp Silverpine. The bus groaned as it wound along the narrow dirt road, trees pressing in on both sides, their branches like fingers trying to claw the sunlight away. When we finally broke through into a clearing, the camp revealed itself, a collection of worn wooden cabins, a mess hall with peeling green paint, and beyond it, a dark line of water glinting through the pines. The counselors greeted us with forced smiles and bright voices, but something in their eyes made me uneasy. It wasn't just the usual tiredness of looking after kids. It was as if they were watching us, constantly counting, making sure every single one of us stayed within sight. That first evening, we had a campfire. Laughter, marshmallows, ghost stories, the kind you tell just to get goosebumps before bed. But when a boy named Eric asked, "What's past the pines?" the lead counselor, Ms. Dalton, went quiet. Her gaze flicked toward the shadowy tree line. "You don't go past the pines," she said flatly. "Ever. Not during the day, not at night, especially not at night." Someone laughed nervously, but no one pressed her for more. Our days were filled with the usual camp activities: swimming, canoeing, crafts. But every time we played near the lake, I noticed the counselors standing unusually close to the edge, eyes sweeping the water. They never let us go deeper than our knees, even though the lake looked calm and inviting. One afternoon, I was helping clean the arts and crafts shed when I found something wedged behind a shelf, a small, water-warped notebook. The pages stuck together, but I managed to peel them apart carefully. The handwriting inside was jagged, the ink smudged by dampness. It comes from the middle of the lake at night. Don't listen when it calls your name. Don't look in the water. I froze. The entries continued, growing more frantic. I saw her face in the ripples. She looked like me, but her mouth was too wide. She said she could take me home. And the last one, barely legible, "It's under the dock." I didn't tell anyone, partly because it sounded insane, partly because I knew they'd just take the notebook and brush it off as a prank. On the fourth night, something woke me. A sound, soft but distinct, like someone humming just outside my cabin window. I sat up, my heart hammering. The rest of the kids were asleep, their breath slow and steady. I crept to the window. The moon was bright, painting the camp in silver light. And down by the dock, I saw her. A girl in a white dress, her long black hair clinging wetly to her shoulders. She stood ankle-deep in the water, staring out toward the middle of the lake. I recognized her instantly. Not because I knew her, but because she looked exactly like the drawing I had made in my head from the notebook's words. She turned her head slowly, as though she knew I was watching. Even from that distance, I saw her lips move. She mouthed my name. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was a dream. But when I passed Ms. Dalton at breakfast, she gave me a strange look. "You didn't go outside last night, did you?" she asked quietly. I shook my head too quickly. That evening, I noticed Eric and two other boys sneaking away during free time. I followed at a distance, my curiosity outweighing my sense of safety. They slipped between the pines, the forbidden area, heading toward the lake from the far side. I trailed them until the trees opened up to a small, hidden section of shoreline. The boys stood at the edge, whispering, laughing, until the water rippled. Something broke the surface. At first I thought it was a fish, but then I saw pale fingers curling over a rock, pulling something upward. It was a head, no, several heads, emerging just enough to reveal glistening, too wide smiles. The boys froze, their laughter dying. And then, they stepped forward into the water as if in a trance. I shouted, and they snapped out of it, stumbling back. Whatever was in the water slipped beneath the surface silently. That night, Eric's bunk was empty. The counsellors said he had gone home early, but none of us had seen a car, and his belongings were still in the cabin. Over the next few nights, the same thing happened to 2 more campers, always after dark, always near the lake. Their names would be removed from the roster, their bunks stripped as if they had never been there. I started sleeping with my flashlight clutched in my hand. On the last night of camp, the power went out. The cabins were swallowed in darkness, and the counsellors moved quickly, herding us toward the mess hall for safety. But in the confusion, I was separated from the group. That's when I heard it. A voice, low and soft, drifting through the trees. My name. Again and again. I should have run the other way, but my feet carried me toward the sound, down to the dock. The lake lay before me, black and endless, and there she was. The girl in the white dress, standing on the water as if it were solid. Her smile was wrong, stretching far too wide, her eyes black and depthless. "Come with me," she whispered, though her lips barely moved. I took a step forward before I realized my feet were already in the water. It was ice cold, gripping my legs like hands. I screamed and fell backward, scrambling away. The girl's smile vanished. She sank straight down, the surface closing over her head without a ripple. I ran. The next morning, the buses were waiting. Camp Silverpine was over for the summer. No one mentioned the missing kids. No one looked at the lake. But as we drove away, I turned to look back one last time. In the center of the water, something broke the surface. A hand, pale and dripping, reaching upward and waving goodbye.